Welcome back, everyone. I'm Nini FC. This is Blue Lines TV, and of course, today we're going to discuss a very important talking point at this time in the season. After seeing our results over the past few months, after seeing how this team has exponentially improved and gotten better in every single department, it honestly feels like now, do we low-key have a chance at winning the title this season? So for today's discussion, I'm joined by two excellent guests, son of Chelsea and Matisse Armani as well. So you guys, starting with Daniel, introduce yourselves. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me on, mate. Great to be here. Great to be here after that big win last night. So it's going to be exciting to talk about because I think in pre-season I was just like third place, but now after recent week, it's hard not to be excited about this team at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting discussion for sure.
Yeah, man, and thank you for having me on as well. I mean, we're ahead of schedule. Do you know what I mean? That's how I see it. We're very much ahead of schedule. Last season, no one had us to finish top four. This season, if you would have gone off what people expected last season, you would have said, top three, top four. But now, it's looking crazy. So we'll see. We'll see. It's looking good, man. I cannot deny that there actually is something going on here.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And for me, it was that manner in which we beat Leeds yesterday. We have to be serious. This was a difficult game. I thought Leeds, they were pressing with intensity and they showed a desire to obviously, play their part in the game. And I felt like we just controlled the game perfectly. And I think if you want to win a league title, there's one thing that a club has to show, and that's the ability to control games. And yesterday we saw that. We started on the front foot, and then once we got that lead, of course we were going to play on the counter attack, and then we created even more opportunities with all the spaces in the transition. So the plan worked beautifully, the game plan was excellent, and the players clearly knew what they had to do to obviously damage Leeds. So starting with you, Daniel, for you, what is one thing that you've seen from the club this season, from the team this season, why do I keep saying the club this season, from the team this season, that makes you feel like, okay, we actually can win the league this season?
Resilience, I think. I think this team can go through difficult periods, and the issue was last season when things would go against Chelsea, momentum swings in games. It was very hard for Chelsea to tip the scales back in a positive direction. Two examples this season at home against Sheffield United and Leeds last night. You've seen, if the same thing happened last season at home where we go 1-0 down early on, would we come back in the same emphatic manner and win the game as confidently as we did? I don't think we would have. I think it is that resilience, and I think there is substance to this team. They may not always play the most stylish game, like the most perfect game that takes you out of your seat. But there is substance to this team. There is something about them, that there is a grit there that I think nights like last night, I think will give Chelsea fans a lot of hope about this team and what they can achieve potentially. That's the more thing for me, I think, as well. And I'm sure we'll get into it. Tactically, I think there's been improvement. Defensively, there's been improvement. Balance, game management, all those things have improved. But yeah, resilience is the big thing for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think just comparing the resilience from this season to last season, I felt like last season we could get bullied, and we saw that at times, especially physically, especially when it came to like doing the nitty gritty, to making that important foul if you have to. We were too clean. We were like a team full of good boys who don't want to be in trouble by the teacher type of thing. And for me, that is one positive from this season, that desire and that grittiness is there. And obviously you, Matisse, as well, man, how do you feel? What is the number one big thing that you've seen this season that tells you that, damn, we can do something this season?
It's the fact that we have a variety of goal scorers. Like I think we're in double digits for the amount of players that have scored for us this season already, and the goals are so evenly shared out. We're not relying on any one individual. There's no one individual in this team we're actually specifically relying on to get us goals. Last season it was very much Tammy for the majority of the season. Then it became Giroud at the end of the season and Pulisic. We're not relying on anybody. The goals are coming from defenders. We're scoring from set pieces now. Our defensive shape is much better. If there was any game where our defensive shape and transitions were going to be tested, as we've seen the spaces in between the lines last season, all the way from preseason, all the way from the preseason to the end, we saw spaces in between the defensive line and the midfield line, and gaps in between. That would be yesterday for it to be exposed, because Leeds are, they push their fullbacks up, their eights rotate. There's so much going on tactically for them, and the intensity at which they do it at. That would have been the time where we are really tested. And again, the team was solid. Apart from that, error at the start, we were very good defensively. So, this team from back to front are just so balanced, so well drilled. There's no weaknesses. I could probably, now I can see the whole starting 11 and I love it. I can see really the whole bench almost and I love it. Do you know what I mean? They have a real depth there. And we haven't, and the thing is that this is not Chelsea at their pinnacle. We haven't seen Pulisic at his best yet. He's just come back from injury. We've barely seen Hudson-Odoi in the Premier League. We haven't seen, so many players that are still yet, we're talking about Kai and Werner not playing well yesterday, and we're still winning 3-1. There's so much more to come from the team in terms of performance levels from individuals that, the depth as well. The depth that we have is no other team in the league has depth like us, I don't think. Yeah. In terms of, senior internationals as backup, maybe not my preferences in terms of maybe Christian and some players like this, but they're still internationals, they're seasoned players, and they're like third, fourth choice in the team. We're talking about can't even get Hudson-Odoi in the squad, Tomori in the squad. Most Premier League teams, these players start. So we depth for the calendar that is coming up is the best depth in the league, and the ability to rotate, as we saw in midweek, and then come into a Leeds game and outrun them. Only Chelsea are doing that this season. Only Chelsea.
Of course. And it's just like, it's all that prep from last season. Lampard's from day one, it's about intensity. It's about obviously getting those fitness levels on point. And I feel like the players obviously take it serious. Like from day one last season, when we read that Mason Mount, for example, after the criticism after the first game against United, immediately he went to get like a dietitian and like a chef so he can get his diet on point. And look at the transformation literally like a year later. Look at his body now. Look how like in great physique he looks, and he's got the fitness and stamina levels for days. So, that's always an ingredient for success. Do you have the work rate? And this team definitely has that work rate. But okay, now that we've both discussed that one thing that really gives us that hope that we can get a win for this season, what is one thing that we have to improve upon, maybe, to really just guarantee it? I mean, what is a weakness that you're seeing? I'll tell you guys mine. I think it's our finishing. Like, if I have one doubt this season, do we have that individual class, or are our young players ready for this season? Are they at that level where they can make that decisive moment happen right now? Like, for example, for me, the best team doing it currently, Liverpool. The perfect balance between individualism and a cohesive, well-drilled team. They have all the perfect components to win games, and do we have that in our attack just yet? I'll let any one of you guys take that.
Do we? I believe we do. I think this team, there's experience in this team as well. I think we there needs to be, not even just strikers, but just speaking on the likes of Giroud, Azpilicueta, Thiago Silva. These guys are going to be so pivotal to when it comes neck and neck at the end of the season. And we're talking about Liverpool, where they've got the experience to keep going game to game. They know the pressures on them, when they're in a dogfight, a real race. They've done it with Man City before. And I think those three players in particular, Kante as well, who's been there and done it, those type of players are going to be pivotal. So I'm looking at our team, and I'm just, in comparison to Liverpool, I just think Liverpool don't have the depth we do in the attack. Like I said, Hudson-Odoi not even getting in the squad. That's alarming, but at the same time, it's you can't even really criticize Frank, because it's like, who would you put him on the bench
That's
for?
what I'm saying. Yeah.
You can have opinions about who you take, but there's no outright clear error there in his decision making, because everybody on the bench is a quality player. And it's literally to the point now where we've got to the point where we cannot actually fit all of our quality players on the bench. That is ridiculous. That Liverpool don't have that going for them.
Of course. And I definitely think, even just talking about Callum, and of course you guys, and whenever you want to interject, so feel free to, but with Callum, I think it's quite simple that this season, it's like Frank told him, okay, I understood that last season with the injury you had, it meant that it was going to take you a long time to get back to full speed, and obviously to do that, you need consistent game time, which I couldn't afford to due to having other players in the team and keeping that meritocracy, keeping things fair and balanced. So it feels like this season he's been promised cup games, he's been promised European games, and I think this is best for Callum to just get back into playing his natural way, get back into carrying that ball, and which is the main thing I think Lamps wants to see is that dribbling ability and doing it away from the pressure, because I think last season as well, maybe the fan pressure did play its part towards maybe Hudson Odoi not being as confident best all the time. So even from that, I feel like this season, now that Lampard's got like a team in his image, he can really just his management of players and situations is flawless at this point in time. You're not hearing any unhappy voices. Everyone's getting fair game time. We've got the goals equally distributed across many different players this season already.
Zuma's top scorer. He's joint top. Do you know what I mean? It's unheard of. It's unheard of.
I know. We'll talk about Zuma in a bit. Yeah, King Zuma needs to be discussed later on. But actually, you know what? I think maybe now is the best time. I think our defense right now is one of the key signs that we can do something, because we can seal wins out. We can defend, and I feel like when we defend now, teams don't have a stiff on goal against us.
No, I completely agree. I mean, midweek was really telling for me, because we rotated the whole back four. The whole back four was rotated. And the fact that they, again, first half, they were looking like they were kind of defending for their lives at some points, but they still didn't concede. And then second half, they really was looking more comfortable. But that all starts with Mendy for me. The fact that he can instill that confidence into the backline. We talk about last season, people saying, is the defense instilling confidence in Kepa? Is the defense, good enough to defend Kepa? Is it? Are we allowing too many quality of shots? Now this season, you're talking about a goalkeeper who's, it's the other way. It's the flip side. He's instilling confidence into the defense. I think his save percentage is something crazy in the 80s. I think he's either joint most or top clean sheets in the league. This is the standard goalkeeper that we should be having at the club. This is what it should be. So he really has made a massive difference, I think.
Well, as well, on top of that, I think that the thing about, we look at some of the best Chelsea teams over the years. I mean, how many times did Cech get exposed? How many times did Courtois get exposed? I think those keepers of the top teams shouldn't have to make thousands of brilliant saves, all at once. Cech, of course, in the Champions League run had to, and that was an heroic, run for Cech. But we're talking about a really good Premier League team. About the defence. I mean, it sounds obvious, and I love Kurt. I think he's had such a brilliant story at Chelsea, and I love the success he's having at the moment. He's really taken his opportunity. But I just love watching Thiago Silva. It's like having JT back, which is a really simplistic thing to say, but I think it is. It's small things like last night, like he comes off, like we're worried we're going to be down to 10 men for the last few minutes, and he's walking off the pitch and he's turning around to the team, and he's shouting instructions as he's walking off injured. He's just a serious player that's added so much more than I think most of us expected him to. There seems to be such maturity and calmness back there now. Like, I'm not, stressing when we concede a set piece. I have confidence that this team can deal with set pieces. I mean, the best example of that was, do you remember the Rennes game a couple of weeks ago, where just before half time, I know they eventually scored from a corner in the second half, but there was this period of pressure just before half time, and I was like, imagine that period of pressure with the defence last season. It just, it would have been terrible. Watching Leeds defend set pieces last night was like watching us defend set pieces last season. So I think the defence there it's just been brilliant, and it's wonderful to see Reece James as well. Reece has come on so much this season defensively. We know the creativity was always there from him, but I think what he's done so far this season defensively has been incredible. And I think there's been a vindication for him in recent weeks. And for Ben, I said it for months that I felt that left back was the key area, and it's wonderful to see. I know we've spoken about this before. I've spoken to Matisse about this. Me and you and Nini have spoken about this. Chilwell has just, for me, been incredible so far this season. It's like he's been playing at Chelsea for 5 years already. And
he with me, I'm always happy to put my hands up when I'm wrong. I was wrong about Olivier Giroud. I was, getting too clouded by some of his form for Arsenal. You know, I was wrong about Christian Pulisic. You know, when we first signed him, and we didn't know if Hazard was going to leave, and you know, when Hudson-Odoi's future was in a very precarious situation, I was thinking, is this the best signing to make right now? But I was wrong, and you know, I'm always happy to be wrong because I can learn from these moments and get better. And you know, I was wrong with Ben as well. Now, I didn't underplay. I didn't say he was a bad player, not at all, but I just wasn't fully aware of his other skills to his game, and I didn't give them enough credit. I mean, yeah, of course, I know about some of the forward passes and stuff, but you know, watching a few highlight clips or watching the odds Leicester City game, reading about him, it's not the same thing as watching him play for 90 minutes straight. And
yeah,
I kind of feel like right now, is there a more complete left back in the country at this point in time? Because what can't Ben do? You know, I mean, the guy is stupidly fast, knows how to use his pace, ridiculous in the air. I mean, and I really think that was the main reason why he was signed, was that aerial dominance. Because wow, he reminds me a lot of Ashley Cole when I see him play. To be honest, just that tenacity, like the way he's got his technique for winning them balls in the air. Boom, goes in hard, fast every time. And obviously, you know, you can even understand some of the form for Leicester City now in hindsight. Let's looking back. I mean, if they're like forcing you to stay and you don't want to stay, I mean, why the hell are you going to play your very best for them? And not when you know that, you know, Lampard's wanted you since an entire 12 months. So for me, solve the left back problem. I think Mendy solved our goalkeeper issue as well. You know, Kepa, I think he's a good player, of course, a player at this level he is, but I definitely think that something has affected him. I think his confidence is mental. I kind of feel a lot of it is mental because with Kepa, you see him do the right things sometimes, but it's not consistent. And for me, the number one reason why we are a team that can defend more than Thiago, more than Mendy, more than Ben, is the fact that Kante is our DM in front of our defence.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad we don't have to have this Kante debate anymore. I'm glad that like I don't have to make any videos anymore saying what is Kante's best position. It's just I did think that having Kante fit was going to be a big plus for Chelsea wherever he played, right? Just having him fit for a season would be better than it was last year, and it would improve our midfield. I think it's good that Frank has gone back to what he started to do in Project Restart, because it felt like he wasn't going to do that and he was sort of retreating on that a bit. It feels to me like, you know, Kante's not back where he belongs because he's never really played this role for Chelsea before, but it's clearly working. Something has clicked. I felt, you know, tactically Lampard, I think I was a little bit concerned in the first half, and I felt the first half was the best against Leeds, was the best time to see this 4-3-3 really tested for in a unique way, sort of the way you want it to be tested, to see if it can withhold pressure.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit concerned at half time because it felt like our midfield was being bypassed quite easily. I know that's the way Leeds play. They want to go out, you know, they want to bypass the midfield. They want to get to their wide players and attack you that way. But the second half, the way that game changed, and suddenly Kante was dominating in that second half. And that's also on Kante, but I also think that's on Frank tactically, because
100%,
the way that game shifted at half time to go from quite an erratic game to one that was fully in Chelsea's control.
And it made a ton of sense to, you know, amazing. It made a ton of sense to do that because, you know, with how Leeds were kind of defending to, you know, in the first half, very compact, keeping their shape, we could have forced to push another man forward. And this is the beauty of Kante. You know, he can do everything in midfield. So, like, tactically, when we need to make things and, you know, change things on the fly, we've got the players and the personnel who can do that right now, and I think that is such a massive advantage over the course of the season to have. And Matisse, man, I know you definitely got your thoughts and opinions on Kante because, you know, you've had some very controversial opinions about him yourself. You know, it took, like, again, I don't know what your thought process is now, but do you feel like maybe some of the criticism, like maybe in regards to like the technical aspects, the passing, some of the worries you had, do you feel like they're all gone now, or there's still a few things you need to see?
Nah, for me, he's passed all of his tests. Do you know what I mean? I'm not one to be what's the word? I'm not one to hold on to something.
Not stubborn. Yeah.
I'm not one to hold on to. They do this a lot on football Twitter, but I'm not one to hold on to something for no reason. For me, his two tests were Tottenham and Leeds. two completely different teams, but two teams that were going to test him in different ways. He's passed both of those tests. I do agree. I think the midfield were, in the first half, it was a bit erratic. We were definitely, dispossessed quite a lot. Kai was very quiet. The second half completely changed. When Kovacic came on, he was unbelievable. I think, he started dribbling really well, and Kante is the heart of it. I think what is so key for Kante, because I knew he was going to make interceptions, I knew he was going to make tackles. That's something he's always done, regardless of where he's playing. But on the ball, in that zone, I've seen him on the ball against Liverpool in the right side of midfield, dribble past players. I've seen his technical ability there, but to receive the ball and in that zone is completely different. And he's passed that test for me. He's been nothing short of immense. And I think now I'm looking at it in a fact of, until Billy's back, there's no out and out right deputy to Kante in position right now, which is scary, because we need him to stay fit. I think last season the biggest worry was Kante is, are we going to run him into the ground? Are we going to be able to keep him fit? Are we going to keep seeing these injury issues? That was a lot of talking point. Do we need to cash in? Similar to Hazard. I think the fan base were worried because, Hazard is a player that, we kind of did end up, he wanted to leave, but we did cash in at the right time, if you think about it, because he's picking up all these injuries now, probably on the back of all these ankle, breaks that they've been trying to do in the Premier League for all these years, and he's withstanded them. And, unfortunately, he can't stay fit at the moment. I think Kante was a similar issue. People were wondering, after all the mileage he's clocked up, is he going to be able to progress into his 30s without getting injured? Do we need to cash in? But credit to the team and, Frank, they've managed him well this season. They've rested him when he's needed to be rested. They haven't run him into the ground. And he's been brilliant. He's been one of our best players of the season. So, the good thing about me is, when I'm giving my opinion, it's not really personal. Do you know what I mean? So even if I do criticize, if they're doing well, that's fantastic news for me, because that means we don't need to. For me now, we don't need to splash in the DM role. It's great. Now when I'm talking to Alex, I'm like, yo, do we need to splash? Do you know what I mean? Because for me, Kante, no one gets ahead of him. No, even incoming.
Yeah. And who's better than him?
Ahead of him. When he's playing like this, nobody can get ahead of him. Like he's still top for interceptions. All the mobility stuff we spoke about last season that was a worry fitness-wise. He's ahead of everybody in the league for it. So now the question is, how much do Chelsea want to invest in the DM role? I know obviously the age gap is big, but for me, when Kante's playing like this, no one starts ahead of him. So
I mean,
it's going to be really interesting.
I mean, this is the thing, with all the criticism that Kante would get back then, I'd always be thinking, okay, so are people saying that they'd have players like Fabinho and Rodri ahead of him in the team if they could? And no one ever says that, because it kind of feels like, well, we'd be weaker without Kante in the team. But I don't know, man. I just think sometimes players can be hit too hard with a stereotype, which means that even when we all look at the same player with our own two eyes, we can just interpret it different ways. And I just think that the reason why Kante's always been world class for me is because he's always been a two-touch player. One touch control, second touch pass, and it was always at pace, always moving the ball quickly. And for me, that's like one of the key signs if you're a top player. Can you do all this shit at pace? Can you do it quickly? Can you, do you have that intensity in you? And comparing to players like the Ndidis and other like DMs here who need like 2-3 touches just to get the ball control before moving it on, I felt like that part of Kante's game wasn't like acknowledged enough, but it should have been, because of course when you got the basics like that, it means that you can do a lot more with your game then, if you know what I mean. So I just think that Kante, by far the best defensive presence in this country. I mean, reading the danger, the way he's helped improve our counter-attacks ridiculously as well. I mean, how he even starts the attacks, he's always moving between the lines and free himself up as a passing option. Like, he honestly had I tweeted this earlier too, but he had the best, perfect development at this club when he signed. Starting with Conte, getting him to play forward passes and, be a bit more confident in that area. To Sarri, who just brought out even more stuff in his attacking game, from moving into spaces to receive passes, off the ball movement, just getting inside the box more, and just, have expressing his offensive responsibilities. And I think right now, you combine all the skills from what made Kante sick already before we signed him to what he's added since he signed for us. This is the best Kante I think I've seen. I think him as a DM means he could easily play there another 4 or 5 seasons easily, because Kante was already is seen as a superhuman already. And the fact that now you can get more longevity, playing a bit deeper, not having to play box to box as much, I honestly feel like, and I'm happy, because I've always wanted to see this, but for Kansai to fully transition to be that Makelele player. Because I've
Well,
always thought he
also,
can do it.
I think the thing is he's got a player around him in Mason Mount who can match him in terms of mobility and
Yeah.
like an engine. You know, the thing I think the issue was maybe in the past was Kante maybe a little bit more advanced is a good option, but unfortunately, if you say got Jorginho in that midfield, who obviously doesn't have the same level as him in terms of mobility, you can sort of be halted by that. But the fact that he's got Mason in there as well, being that all-action player too, and helping him out, sometimes you'll see Mason drop a little bit deeper as well to help Kante, say with a passing option or just whatever it is in terms of Mount sort of harassing and pressing and tactical sort of awareness. I think both of them work so well together, and I think Frank's got that sort of uncompromising now midfield, because I felt that the 4-2-3-1 was a compromise probably. And it feels since that Krasnodar game where he switched in the last 20 minutes, everything's changed. And I did think back then, could that be a defining 20 minutes of the season? At the moment, it does look like it. So it's just, having Kante back fit, I think managing him well. I think Chelsea have done a lot better this year with managing players, at least so far this season, and it's such a tricky year in terms of that. So long may it continue.
100%. Man.
I think that game against Arsenal under Conte, where he played DM that one time, scarred the fan base. They were like, "That he's never played there before. This is ridiculous. Put him back in his position. He was shocking lone DM. That was a bad game for him." And I think he's evolved. Do you know what I mean? He's evolved. He's his whole career has just been him evolving. Like you've mentioned, all the different managers. And for me, what he is he's a quick learner. So no matter where he's been moved to, whether it's a double pivot, whether it's in a 3 advanced, whether it's now a lone DM, he seems to learn very quickly. He's a very intelligent player. And I think him and Mount are undroppable in this midfield. Undroppable. Mount was unbelievable. I can't continue without speaking about Mount. I think it was 7 big chances created yesterday. The set piece taken was absolutely fantastic from him as well. Just the guy is just improving so quickly in that role. He's just been, for me, in that midfield, dropping back deeper, a breath of fresh air. And it's got to the point where those two are kind of the mainstays, and it's really between Kai and Cover to fight out at the moment. And
damn right, as it should be. Obviously with Kai, we'll talk about him later on for sure. You guys don't worry about that. But even looking at our midfield right now, it feels like we've got the regens from the 05 or the 06, 07 team, I'd say, or the 09, 010 team. We've got like Kante doing his Mac impression, the French international, and DM Mason. Seeing him in that Leeds game too. Obviously, we all noticed how he was like dropping down that left-hand channel to like receive the passes from the centre backs and stuff. I was seeing that, and I was remembering watching Frank Lampard doing that all the time. Lampard's like the way some of these like kids these days are trying to like tarnish this guy's name to make him, sound like a player that he wasn't. I mean, Lampard was the ultimate box-to-box like midfield player. I mean, defensively off the ball on point, offensively on point, and he could start the attacks, and he would always go behind the halfway line to receive the pass. Either way, he can play it quickly, switch it wide to the fullbacks, or just get that tempo started again. So seeing Mason Mount doing that,
passes,
the crossfield ones, like the classic ones.
People think Frank was an incredible goal scorer. He just was, right? And that's what he'll be remembered by. But there was anyone who thinks it's similar in a sense with Mason, right? I think people try and box Mason in and say he's this type of player, he's that type of player. I think that's quite reductive, to be honest, at this point, because what I'm seeing this season is a guy who is not only really good at pressing, not only really good at being a really good engine in the center of the park, but he's a creative player as well, and he's proving that. As Matisse pointed out, no Chelsea player has created more in a game, big chances in the last 5 seasons than Mason Mount did against Leeds, right? And we're thinking about Eden Hazard, we're thinking about probably Cesc Fabregas as well, probably being in that stat as well. Mason is just that pass for Timo that should have been a goal.
I mean, that was world class.
It was world class.
Same pass to Phillips.
It's the thing is if this is the thing with Mason, right? It's like if Kovacic plays that pass, if Kevin De Bruyne plays that pass,
Yeah.
I haven't been on Twitter, but I assume most people would be, repping that and saying what a world-class player this is. Mason has been incredible so far this season, right? And I'm so happy for Mason because I think that there was so much nonsense in the opening weeks of the season. And the great thing about him is I think he's making his harshest critics look more and more silly every week. And I think that he's clearly got such an incredible head on him in terms of working hard, in terms of improving himself. And I think players like Kai, players like Werner, new players that have come into the team, he stepped up. And I think most of the young players have done that this season, and Mason's just the purest representation of it. So anyone saying that Mason should be nowhere in this team, I think you got to eat a massive, massive slice of humble pie now.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. As I always would say, for people that were really super harsh on Mason, talking as if like they're scouts or they've seen players for years and they know exactly what they're talking about, saying you'll never make it here, I just was like, ugh. Like, this is the impossible part of like obviously doing this type of YouTube stuff, because it's like you can't really have like a debate or like a conversation to even break down some of the ignorance, I'd have to say, because as I'm always going to say this, if you've seen Mason from the youth academy, he was playing the same role. He was drifting between the lines, moving in the channels, and I'm not gonna lie. Today I've been happy to see a few beautiful people remembered my comparisons with Mason Mount and De Bruyne. And I know when I say comparisons means different things to different people. But my definition of comparison, a stylistic one, is that let's not pretend that every player we see is like a super unique version of themselves. I mean, for example, like a Ronaldo and Son, of course, not the same level, but they kind of play that same role, don't they? Like, there's certain defenders, ball-playing ones that kind of play the same role, and obviously where they rank is dependent on the quality of the player. I don't see the difference between him and De Bruyne from how I've been seeing Mason being used in our academy. And I knew that we were always going to adopt this style for the first team eventually, and now that Kante's here and Mason can play his best position, now more parts of his game are unlocked. Like the passing, he's always been creative. When he was people last season saying he wasn't creative, he wasn't being used in a creative role. He was being in a role to move inside the box. Like, he wasn't even there for the team because he was mainly just defending off the ball.
I also don't feel like he was as comfortable last season. There were definitely moments where his decision making could have been better. His weight of pass could have been better. Maybe picking his head up, and looking around him, awareness could have been better. So I definitely do feel like the fan base didn't. The funny thing is, last season I always knew Mason can pass. My frustration with last season is that he didn't make those passes, and I think if anybody had not watched him at Vitesse or at Derby, they would have thought Mason couldn't pass last season. That's what they would have.
But for me, man, I think it comes down. I think it comes down because obviously what you're saying is right. But that's because Mason was playing a lot further upfield. He wasn't playing like deeper, receiving passes from defenders where he could even show that part of his game. Like when we can count on our hands how many crossfield passes we saw last season, because he couldn't do that because of the role he had to play. You know what I mean? So
his passing last season was more in the final third, and like I said, I think now that he's deeper, you're seeing him way more comfortable. You're seeing a flair to his game that people didn't think he had. The way he can, put Camavinga on his backside, the way that he can, he makes these cute little dribbles on the right hand side in the channel sometimes to set up opportunities. He did it really well one of the games and flashed it across the box. There's so much technique in the player that no one really. Well, a lot of people last season didn't think he had, and for me, it's just great to see him now in his natural position. It's where he wants to play, and he's able to express all the parts of his game that he really, he's always had. He just hasn't been in the position to do so. So he was sacrificed last season, and I'm glad he's not being sacrificed anymore. I hope I don't have to see him sacrificed again, to be honest, because I think he's better.
I think we moved away from that now. I agree with that, and I do think we moved away from that because I know in the market we'll probably sign at least a Kante backup, at least maybe in the next window or in the summer. But I think we definitely need one so we can maintain 4-3-3 in case anything happens to Kante. But now that we're playing this way, I do think that Mason's going to start shining. And obviously, I think the biggest takeaway for Mason Mount is that at the end of the day, we've been talking about a guy last season that was only 20 years old, and I think he's only turned 21 now. He's going to be 22 soon, something like that. So he's still very, very young and has plenty of years ahead of him. And when you look at like the careers of like your Gerrards, your Lampards, Scholeses, where they first started when they were 19, 20, 21 was completely different to where they ended up as they got older. And I think we can't forget how crucial development is, because people might add all these criticisms about Mason Mount's game, but I just feel like to be fair, well, this is what I always do. For me, my philosophy in life, I always analyze the pros and cons to anything. It's bare annoying at times, but I would just do that. And obviously, there were lots of pros that Mount took away, and last year was a massive educational year for him. Off the ball, his work rate, would he have been would his intensity in the press be as good this season if it wasn't for putting that work in last season? No. Physically, he's ready as well. Defending for the team off the ball, all these crucial parts that are very important for a player's education. He learned last season, and he's become a stronger, more intelligent, better player for that. So, I do think sometimes when it comes to just like, anytime people talk about like under 24-year-olds, whatever, you kind of got to do it in the sense that, okay, I can critique actions you did today without it defining your qualities as a player for the rest of your life, type of thing.
Yeah, that's always been my thing with Mason, is that I've had criticisms in the past, but I've never made it an overall statement of he's not going to make it. And I think people are a bit too dramatic with that kind of stuff. They're doing it with Tammy now. You'll see his shouts where Tammy's never going to be good enough to make it. For me, Tammy is at least good enough to be in the squad. The only reason why I'll never say he's a nailed-on starter is because I don't think, from my time following Chelsea, there's never been a nailed-on starter striker. You've had Anelka having, you had Drogba to fight Anelka, to fight Torres, to fight Shevchenko. Haaland is about, Chelsea always going after the best. So, but he's always going to be, for me, good enough to be in the squad. His development and the way that he shot up in the last year to being, a guy that gets that many goals with no penalties. This season, his goal ratio contribution is still very high as well. His build-up play has improved. The only real last thing that he's got to improve for me is his heading and his anticipation from Reece James's crosses. That's something Giroud can teach him. But again, people writing him off completely when at this age, Drogba was nothing like he was towards the end of his career. Mount, again, written off last season as someone who's never going to make it here unless Frank Lampard's manager. Again, a player that's developed very quickly, and it's not even been a year since those statements. For me, when they're like you said, under 23, under 24, people will do it with Kai now. You've got to see the potential. There is potential there. You don't get through the most challenging youth system in the country, all those loan spells, all those different people judging you and putting you through your trials and tribulations, get to the first team, play that many games, and not have something there. It's not. You can't have a bum get to this level, to this point. It doesn't happen. We've talked about ballers who haven't got to this point. Your Jeremy Bogas, your Masundas. These are good players. These are ballers, but they didn't make it to this point, and people will still rate them. So there's no way that any of our first team youngsters don't have something there for you to believe in. It's not possible. That's
I also think like Tammy, like even off the bench against Leeds, really impressed me. He comes on late in the game, right? Giroud's obviously now going to be a nailed-on starter, but there's not like Tammy didn't show any of that. He comes on, he starts to press, he presses well. There were several key interceptions he makes actually from high up to stop Leeds. Making more pressure basically, and on the break as well, helping Chelsea with pace. There's so many things to Tammy's game that I think has impressed me this season. And I mean, it's just typical football, isn't it? And typical the way people look at players. Like 1 week Tammy's scoring key goals for us, and the next, because he struggles against a really good Spurs side and has an off day, probably his first one this season, everyone turns around and says he's not good enough. It's unfortunately that's the
people don't look at the mentality, because the mentality for me is what separates this group of youngsters from the rest of them. The mentality right now is ridiculous. Frank Lampard only surrounds himself with the top mentalities. He had a top mentality, so he's not going to stand for anything less. And I think you've seen that with the players that have come in. You don't worry about their confidence in terms of them maybe not being in the best run of form in terms of Kai and Timo. I don't worry about them because of their mentality. And it's the same with the youngsters. He's not going to have any youngster breakthrough in this team whose mentality is not up to scratch. And that's potentially where you look at a Tomori and you're like, I have to take my foot off the gas. He's fifth choice now. Maybe it is a mentality thing, because I don't think Frank, for someone that sold David Luiz, for Tomori, had Player of the Year Tomori at Derby as well. You know, it's very clear for me that Reece James and Mason Mount make the other youngsters, when they make any minor error, whether it be in their personal life or in the training field or whatever, they make them look 10 times worse, because Mason Mount and Reece don't slip up, and Tammy, they don't. Those three, they don't slip up. They're not here to mess about. So if any of the other guys who come through, and this goes for years to come, if they do anything that really doesn't align with what Reece Mason and Tammy act like Aspilicueta, they act like Kante. That's the level they're at already. So if any other youngster coming through is having any minor slip-ups, and we know there's been a few for some of the other boys, it amplifies it. It makes it look 10 times worse. And when you've got Mark Guehi doing great things at Swansea, you've got Ampadu at Sheffield United, you've got potentially Declan Rice coming in, you've got all these youngsters coming through on a conveyor belt, which is just beyond something we can even manage. We've got a kid at Bayern Munich. We've got a kid at Bayern Munich who scored over the weekend, who went over there. I forget his name.
Musiala.
Yeah. He's gone over there. He's playing in Bayern Munich's team. You know what I mean? And that's the level of academy that's coming through. So there's no room for error for any of these youngsters, especially with Frank.
Exactly. And credit to these guys. They play like they definitely know this, and they definitely feel that. And it's a shame that we can't fully get behind the players all the time. It's a shame that Tammy's getting, I think, just some stupid criticism. Listen, I've got a certain standard. Yeah, if something's just wrong, I'm always gonna say it. I'm not gonna play Mr. Nice Guy. It's stupid, in my opinion. I think it's stupid, the critique against Tammy, and I just think it comes down a lot of times. I think fans just don't like players who do roles for the team, because maybe it's not as sexy, it's not as enjoyable. But all the important stuff that Son of Chelsea was talking about, with Tammy's involvement, especially as in that cameo sub-appearance against Leeds, the intensity up front, the runs in behind as well, creating space for players to move into, all those parts that when you're playing ball on that field, 11 man versus 11 man, you always love players like that. Even from stuff like when we used to play five-a-side, it's the guy that will pass the ball to you. It was always someone that you just got a lot of love for, and someone you respect, because you know what I mean. It's about playing as a team and everyone doing their part together. So, I think Tammy will be stronger for it, but I just feel like this will be like the story of his time here until he is like matured like Giroud from the sounds of things. But of course, wrap up this little discussion. Of course, do we have a chance to win the title this season? Anybody of you guys take that question?
I have to say yes. We're definitely contenders. I can see anytime we've won the league, there's been a clear shift in mentality, quality. These things have been so clear to me. Like when we was chasing the title under Mourinho, but we lost it in the last few weeks. Atletico, we got knocked out in the Champions League to Liverpool. We was close, but we wasn't quite there. I kind of knew we wasn't going to win it. We lacked firepower. It was Demba Ba, Eto'o, and Torres. It wasn't exactly what we really needed to reach the next level. Then Fabregas comes in, Costa comes in, Felipe Luis comes in, and the first day against Burnley, you already knew. Do you know what I mean? It's just very similar to Conte after he made that switch. We went on that run. Man City game, win away from him, you knew. And this Chelsea team, they're having results where it's like, the Premier League is very competitive, so you can't say maybe but you definitely know they're in it for the long haul. There's too much ingredients in the kitchen not to make something nice. That's how I look at it. You've got too many players where that box is ticked. Set piece defending, that box is ticked. Shape, Anthony Barry comes in, that box is ticked. Zuma aerial dominance in both boxes, that box is ticked. Variety of goal scorers, Reece James. There's just too much going on for there not to be something going on.
That's what I mean. Lampard's chefing up right now. You know what I mean? Lampard is chefing up in the kitchen, and this is a beautiful meal that he's making right now. But obviously, Daniel, for you, do you feel like we can do it this season, or do you need a bit more time to ascertain what's happening?
I think it still is 11 games, and I think that I look back to last season when we were 11 games in and we were doing quite well. Similar points tally, actually. I think it was. We're almost a little bit behind, so we still are very early in the season. On that Conte year, that I was actually at that Man City away game, and that was the moment I think I, like so many, turned around and felt, actually, I think we might actually be in a title race here. I do wonder if something similar may have to happen. So say we beat Man City, for instance, in a couple of weeks' time in a new year. I think a big win like that. Big wins always help, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think those are always landmark games. I don't feel like they're always essential because, Chelsea continue to put away the rest of the teams. Chelsea are going to be in a good position. I'll say this. It's still very early. Still a lot can change. I have a lot more confidence and faith in this team that they're going in a much more positive direction. I think there's undeniable proof now to me that Frank Lampard has improved Chelsea. I think that's the thing we can say right now. Whether this is going to be more of a 13-14 type season where we come close to the title but don't quite get there or not, I think that it could be something greater. I'm just excited by Chelsea at the moment. I think you have to be. And I think, as Matisse said, there are many ingredients coming together now. And when I look at Kai, who hasn't hit full form yet, when I look at Timo, who probably should be scoring more, but we're still winning games with those players maybe having some difficulties, you got to be happy about that, right? And the young players are flourishing at the moment. I feel that, there's, as I said right at the start, there's resilience in this team. There's maybe a little less style at times, but a lot more substance, which is what you need to win a Premier League title.
Yeah, I definitely think what you said, it's nail on the head. I think, this season's all been about the substance. I think for me, the fact that we have a serious defence and, I really get that strong confidence and that feeling that, we are going to seal this out. And when I'm seeing teams struggling to create opportunities, Leeds, for example, they've had some pretty crazy high-scoring scorelines this season against bigger teams. Wow, what was I about to say then? Against big teams as well, and big teams are finding it difficult as well. So, the fact that we can influence our game at the same time as minimizing the threats of our other team is what I used to see from Chelsea teams back in the day when Lampard, Ballack, bossing in midfield, Drogba up front, destroying teams, Terry, leader, captain, legend in defence, and Petr Cech and Cole, just being the legends they were as well. And I think that it feels like we've created like regens now for a lot of these guys, and that's what we're seeing. And it's a mad situation because what we didn't have back then is a manager with a vision, long-term vision, who's united the club together. And I really feel like now, not now, but I feel like soon I'll get my answers in regards to, okay, if anything ever happened to Lampard, but he left in the future to manage England, or he's just thinking, you know what, I want to live in Barcelona for a few years and brush up on my Spanish. I feel like we would be good now. We would be good, and we wouldn't go back to the stupid way of conducting things like we used to do. So there you guys. That was the discussion in regards to whether we have an opportunity to win the league this season. For me, my closing thoughts, I think we do. We're seeing everything right now. We're scoring goals, not conceding much, clocking the clean sheets. Every week, there's about 5 players that you can speak about for man of the match. Times are beautiful right now, so I hope you guys are feeling it too. I hope you feel that positivity and that energy. And I'll see you guys soon with some more videos.